Hello, and thanks for joining us for our webinar, Armis+Cisco ISE, Better Threat Detection and Response for Unmanaged and IoT Devices. My name is Jeff Saputo, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. All lines have been muted for the duration of today's call, but please feel free to ask questions using the questions feature in BrightTalk. We'll take some time at the end of this call to get to your answers, and if we don't get to everyone or if we run out of time, we'll be sure to follow up with you later. Now I'd like to introduce today's speakers, Brian and Terrence. Brian Gonzalez is Senior Manager of Product Management and Business Development for the Security Business Group at Cisco Systems. His primary job responsibilities include product management and business development on the Cisco Identity Services Engine partner ecosystem. And Terrence Davis is a solutions architect for enterprise accounts at Armis. His experience spans 3 decades in networking and security and includes roles managing the Network Control Center at NASA, as well as senior positions at networking and security companies like Sprint, IBM, Logarithm, and Kenna. And with that, I will turn it over to Terrence.
Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate it, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. So when I first started working in the industry back in the 80s, having connected devices meant literally they were wires connected to the back of the computer. And no wires, no connection, right? So move forward in time several more years, or a lot of years, actually. And we're all concerned with how we would monitor and manage the growing number of BYOD. And now here we are in 2020. There's been an explosion of unmanaged and IoT devices. These devices are, for the most part, unagentable. And by next year, the thought is that close to 90% of the devices that you're going to see on a network will be those unagentable or IoT devices. These are devices such as ICS or IoT devices, PLCs, medical devices, smart TVs, digital assistants, and really more. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what I'm really talking about on these devices. For instance, like an infusion pump that we found, which was infected with malware, and this is Armis finding this, was infected with malware, which basically set off an alert. And the problem is that because this device was connected to a patient at the time, they couldn't really remove the device. I mean, what are they going to do, right? So the hospital actually had to assign a nurse to sit next to this patient all night to make sure that it continued to operate properly. And can you imagine, you know, you've got Uncle Tom or Aunt Jean in the emergency room, and you're taking care of them, you really care for your loved ones, and there's this pump that's actually pumping or helping them live, and there's malware on it, you know. But here's the thing, these unmanaged devices, just like IoT devices and the one I'm talking about, this medical device, can't be scanned, and because scanning can adversely impact the operation of those agents or have agents put on them, right? So they're critical, but they're unprotected, and we got to watch out for these kind of devices. Also, security cameras, right? We talk about security cameras, and it's kind of an oxymoron because they're there to help us protect the environment by showing us what's happening either inside or outside of these places that we have them set up. But, you know, sometimes they have problems. So a security camera accessing a router on port 80 is what we found. Typically, that's an HTTP port, which is somewhat uncommon for a security camera to actually use. So Armis identified the behavior, and it was anomalous, and it was indicative of the way that botnet spread. So we eventually identified it as a botnet, or that it was talking to a command and control channel on a botnet. And so we triggered that camera to be quarantined. But anyway, I'll talk a little bit more about Armis shortly, but first I want to go ahead and let Brian talk to you about Cisco ISE. Brian?
Hi, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, folks. And thanks, Terrence, for the nice introduction. I'm going to talk to you today about how Armis and Cisco ISE kind of integrate, and how this integration kind of enhances both capabilities of Cisco ISE and Armis together in a 1 + 1 = 5 fashion. And I'll talk to you about how that synergy helps you as the end customer. So to level set, I will kind of give you a brief about what Cisco ISE, or Identity Services Engine, is, so that it'll set the stage of what we want to talk to you folks today. So today, when you try to connect to the network, when you either you're plugging a printer in or an IoT device into a port, if you are connecting to the corporate Wi-Fi, either from the office or you in a Starbucks, or if you're coming in via VPN, you kind of VPN because you're quarantined and working from home. All these network access devices, the wireless controllers, the switches, and the VPN concentrators, will first talk back or check back with Cisco ISE to see whether to allow you in or onto that network. Either you are a user that's authorized, or you could be a guest coming in to the office, or you are a device that needs to be on the network because you're part of that infrastructure. So this crucial functionality is what we call as network admission control, or NAC. You're trying to grant access control policy and get some context awareness to define what kind of access control policy to allow or allow the device onto the network. So a nice analogy I give people trying to understand or wrap their heads around ISE is think of ISE as, say, passport control at an airport. You come in, you're a citizen, you walk to the left. If you're a visa, you walk in the center, and you get authenticated, you get authorized depending on what your status is, and when you leave the country, you get accounted for. So that's kind of a nice analogy of what ISE, the Raiders AAA server, is. So as part of doing that day job of allowing people onto the network, ISE will also kind of profile what device will bring you on the network. Is it Terrence on his corporate MacBook, or is it Brian bringing a jailbroken Samsung Galaxy Tab, or is it someone plugging in an infusion pump in a hospital? So as part of doing that day job, we identify what devices on the network. We do things like posture assessment. So we check to see if the laptop has the current patches, does it have the current antivirus turned on? In conjunction with our MDM partners, we will see if the mobile device has its particular version of iOS or Android. Does it have a pin lock enabled, for example? And based on that, we will kind of put the user in particular segments or VLANs depending on what your policy is. So we basically we give you as a user that access control policy. What happens next is that because of this rich context that we learn of what's on the network, you can apply better rules of what to allow and how to kind of segment your network based on not just an IP address and a MAC address, but you can you could say that if it is Bob on a iOS version 9 and above, and if he's in building 200 on the first floor between a certain point in time, let's assign him as an employee and put him onto the production VLAN. However, if he brings in his own BYOD tablet and if it's not onboarded, only give him access to the guest network, because you don't want that device which is not sanitized maybe to access your crown jewels. So that's another good reason of why this context is really important to make access control decisions. So let's see how we kind of do that. So basically, ISE today is our third generation of NAC product. We started off with Cisco NAC and then Cisco ACS, and we moved into Cisco ISE, a third gen product. And with all our customers that began to use ISE, they found users to use this network context to make make their partner products even better with this network context. So we have a very healthy ecosystem around Cisco ISE, and the three kind of big use cases is, one, that rich context that I talked to you about can be shared with an eco partner such as Armis. We share this context so that you can you can put the who, what device, what access, and tie that to events. It's just way better than just plain IP addresses. Another reason why we have an ecosystem around ISE is that we can learn from our ecosystem partners. So for example, I mentioned about mobile devices. So we understand from our MDM partners that Brian's Samsung Galaxy Tag is jailbroken, or the pin lock isn't enabled. Or we get telemetry from systems like that give us GPS location, so we can tie GPS location to an access control event. or we could get information from an IoT vendor to give us more detailed granular profiles on saying this MAC address is actually a GE CAT scanner, for example, as opposed to just a MAC address, an IP address that's on the network. And this basically creates a single place of comprehensive network access policy. And the third thing that we've done with Cisco ISE ecosystems is we, in a very unique way, we have allowed our partners like Armis, for example, to basically reach back into the Cisco network. So what I mean about this is, so using our integration methodology called PX-Grid that I'll talk to you in the next slide, we allow our partners to reach back and let the network know to take a corrective action. So remember I mentioned about ISE being that network policy controller. So using this integration, our partners can impact that network access control decision. That means if someone's already on the network and if Armis finds something's not kosher with a particular endpoint, Armis sends us a message and we can take this corrective action. So the important point here is that it can decrease the time and effort and the cost of responding to a security and network event. So how can how we go about doing this? And I'll talk to you about what we call PX-Grid or Platform Exchange Grid. So PX-Grid is the mechanism of how our partners like Armis have integrated with Cisco ISE. Think of PX-Grid as a pub-sub bidirectional messaging fabric for partners to integrate. Now, the industry calls these fabrics SPIFs, or Security Product Integration Frameworks. Other examples could be McAfee's DXL and so on. But what we have done here is with PX-Grid is ISE is the PX-Grid is the product that has all this rich context. It's also the PX-Grid server, and partners, they basically develop the integrations to PX-Grid. It allows for a bidirectional integration, which is not polling in nature. You don't need to continuously poll. You can subscribe to events. You can use mechanisms called adaptive network control or PX-Grid ANC that allows them to interact with the policy on the endpoint. So what happens here in a nutshell is partners such as Armis have built this integration using PX-Grid. It is a pretty straightforward to build these integrations. We use a WebSockets REST over STOMP mechanism for partners to participate in the grid, to publish what they want to share, to take an adaptive network control action, and basically then impact the context policy. So in a nutshell, kind of to summarize, here we have the unmanaged and IoT visibility partners such as Armis, and when the Armis product looks at that endpoint from a granular perspective, it understands from its rich set of profiles what that device is. For example, that infusion pump that Terrence was talking about, that malware, if basically it decided to make a remote call back to the command and control. Now Armis will understand that that device is not supposed to be performing those actions, and it can then in turn send a message, a PX-Grid ANC action to ISE. ISE then immediately will act on that ANC action. That ANC action could result in the device being quarantined into quarantine VLAN, so it doesn't have access to the outside world. It could be, if it's critical, you could switch off that switch port because it's a PoE switch that's connected to that port. You could rebounce that port such that it goes through the whole reauthentication process itself. Or the policy that you as a customer defines of what you want acted upon could basically result in what we call as a Cisco TrustSec group tag change, where now traffic is now directed from the production to a quarantine VLAN, and so on and so forth. So with that, I will hand the ball over to Terrence, who will go more into deep on what the Armis system does and how they've built the integration and how this integrates. Terrence?
All right. Thanks, Brian, and much appreciated. This is great information. So let's talk a little bit more about Armis and what we really do. So in a nutshell, we provide 3 critical functions to address the unmanaged and IoT device security blind spot. But everything that we do for unmanaged and IoT devices works really, really well with managed devices as well. First, we passively discover everything in your environment. Our asset inventory is the most comprehensive device discovery and asset inventory of devices on and off the network. That is with that WLC integration. Next, because we are already seeing all the traffic coming in and out of those discovered devices, we analyze those devices for anomalous behavior, providing our customers with a level of risk management never before seen or possible on those unmanaged devices. And again, you're going to hear me say this all the time, we do this all passively. And finally, Armis, we provide critical detection and response, as well as the ability to conduct remediation of threats to compromised devices. And all of this we do with partner integrations like Cisco ISE. We can provide those responses automatically to threats and anomalies, and really in order to provide the level of protection you need in today's world of unmanaged and unagentable devices. So Armis is really simple and easy to deploy. Number one, we install a virtual appliance, what we call a collector, on your network. We connect to your wired network via SPAN port or a tap. We also optionally connect to your wireless LAN controller via a standard user account. And through these connections, we pull a lot of information from your network and in the airspace back and provide it to our knowledge base. The information that we see in the network traffic allows us to identify device types, OS reputation, applications, and more. And this is how we see, more than just traditional solutions, all, again, passively without an agent. We gather this information, and but here's the thing that I want you to realize. All that data that goes back to the knowledge base is anonymized. We're not taking user information or passwords or payloads or any of that. It's really just that metadata that we strip out of that header information and push that back to the knowledge base so that we can do our cloud-based analysis. And then and then the device knowledge base works with our threat engine to identify risks, questionable behavior, any kind of policy violations that you might see based on the way you set up the policies, any kind of compromises that might be happening, basically attacks. And if we detect something, we can take action by sending information or actions to our integration partners, just like Cisco ISE. And what that does is allows our customers to, disconnect or quarantine those bad devices, just like Brian was talking about. This is the core of how we provide that asset inventory, a risk assessment, and the detection and response. All right. So let me first explain how that magic happens with that agentless device identification and tracking. Because first, remember that we are passive and we provide real-time and continuous monitoring, again, passively. We get deep device visibility by looking at device traffic flowing across the network from your wireless LAN controller, your access points, your switches, and pretty much every network device that you have in your environment. And then those endpoints looking at the traffic. And what we do, again, passively track critical behavior attributes. We pull from 3 different vectors, and you can see those vectors. Why is my screen not going forward? Sorry about this, guys. So we look at device name, device category, device type, device model, MAC address, all of this information. And what has happened is basically given us really about 280 million devices that are being tracked, and that's growing continuously. It's helped us create 11 million different device profiles, and it's actually a little bit more than 11 million device profiles, taking over or pulling information from about 8,000 different attributes of this information, right? And what that does is it allows us to compare that information in real time to the known good behavior that we have for that device, that fingerprint, that signature, however you want to look at it from that device, right? So in that, basic universe of information of all of those devices, that device knowledge base understands how a device should act in any environment. So based on that baseline, what it does is it really helps us to understand if a device gets put into your environment and you don't know anything about it when that device goes into your environment. Most people are going to go, hey, let me baseline that device. But if that device has already been compromised in some way, that device is already going to have a bad behavior, but it's going to actually look normal inside your environment because it's new in your environment, right? That's the new baseline. For us, because we understand what that device is supposed to act like within your environment, basically within everybody else's environment, if it's already acting anomalous, we're going to know. And we're going to be able to trigger those policy violations, basically abnormal behavior or inappropriate connections that we see. We're going to be able to trigger that and then take action again using, our integration partners like Cisco ISE. So, and by the way, did I mention that we do this all passively? I think I did, right? Without agents. All right, so we at Armis don't take any direct action. We completely work with our integration partners. And what that would look like in the case of Cisco ISE is we would integrate through the PX grid controller that Brian was talking about, using the adaptive network control to create specific policies of action through Cisco ISE. And I'm going to show you that here in just a minute in the demo. And if we see, for example, a device with anomalous traffic like a CCTV camera communicating with a botnet CNC address, we basically push that action through Cisco ISE. We can do it manually, which I'll show you, and we can then do it automatically if we create the right policies. So let me really get us to the demo environment. All right, so hopefully everybody can see my screen. And so in the demo environment, what we're really looking at is this is basically the Armis dashboard. In this Armis dashboard, we're going to show you all of the devices that we found, including those high-risk devices, those things that we need to probably take care of right away. And you see the 24 up there. Any kind of threat activities that we might see within that environment as well. And we also give you alerts. So any alerts that we think that you might have to act on right away. So those are set up so that you can see the high-risk alerts or the high-severity alerts first, such as the crack attacks that are detected or the botnet infection that I was talking about just a minute ago, and then medium severity alerts down towards the bottom, and then, of course, the low severity alerts, those things that you can wait on right now. You got to get to those high alerts first. We're also going to provide you with all of these different reports or these different dashlets, and these are customizable towards the login user of the Armis instance. So every corporation that is a customer of Armis may have 3 or 4 different groups of people that are logging in. It could be your SOC operators, or maybe there's a SOC operator in the morning that has a different report than the SOC operator in the afternoon because he's responsible for looking at vulnerabilities on systems, whereas the SOC operator in the morning is just coming in and looking at any kind of threats that might have happened during the night. So he can customize all of these dashlets or all of these reports to actually provide him all of the useful information that he needs just so that he can see that stuff up front, all right in front of him, right? So that, I can take action on everything that I see right away. So I'm going to go in real quick, and I want to kind of look at imaging devices because that's what we're talking about, is that integration with Cisco ISE. And I just thought I'd pop up an unmanaged device. This is a security camera in a conference room. One of the things that we're going to do at Armis is we're going to gather as much information as possible on that device, including the MAC address, IP address, manufacturer, the model of that manufacturer of that specific camera, in this case, the category of camera, and the type of camera. We're also going to show you when we first saw it, last saw it, and where we last saw it at. So if you're thinking about a tablet as a use case, for instance, and you lay a tablet down in a broom closet and forget about it, you want to go back and find that tablet, we can at least look at where that tablet was last seen according to the access point that it last connected to. The other thing that we're going to show you is additional information, but I want to kind of specifically look at the traffic. Here's a normal camera. The kind of stuff that you should see from a normal camera is, of course, port 3702, which is that multicast of, here I am, I'm a camera, come look at the images that I'm going to be able to broadcast to you. The other thing that you're going to look at is 554, port 554, that real-time streaming protocol of here's the actual video images that I'm pushing towards the computer that you're monitoring that camera from, right? And then, of course, port 8080 is the control of that camera if there's any kind of motion where you can turn it, or if you want to change to a different camera, you're going to be using port 8080 to tell that camera that you're no longer going to be looking at the multicast information. Of course, just basically turning that off. And that's what you would expect, right? A normal camera acting normal within this environment, right? So what does an abnormal camera look like? I'm going to go back to the inventory. I'm going to pick up an imaging camera again. I'm going to come down here to this roof camera that we've got. And again, we're going to show you the same things: MAC address, IP address, the manufacturer and model, again, when and where we found it. But in this case, I want you to pay attention to the traffic here. We're seeing everything that we're supposed to see, right? We're seeing 3702, which is that multicast. I'm going to turn that off so we don't have to look at it. We're also seeing port 8080, which is that normal traffic of the control of the camera, and of course that real-time streaming protocol 554. But you look here, there's an anomaly inside our view, right? It's pretty easy to see that, and that's port 443. And there should be no reason why this camera is using port 443. So to get an idea of what's happening on April 22nd, or what happened on April 22nd, I'm going to go and start looking at services. And here you can see, as I start turning off the computers that that system was looking at, there's that anomaly. There's that, that port 443, which was really that command and control for Santa's Big Candy Cane, which is an actual known command and control for a botnet. So now that we see this botnet that's happening within this environment, and we see all of this data that it's shooting across to that botnet, we can actually tie into that and see the alert that's happened. And in this case, because of that anomaly, it's a compromised device and a botnet that was detected. We can actually click on that information and see exactly what's happening, and then take an action against that. We can, basically quarantine that device or just suppress the alerts. But if I go back to these alerts and I'm taking a look at this, on this imaging camera, the part that's really cool is if I wanted to enforce just this device manually, I could actually just click right here, select my enforcement integration, Cisco ISE, and then as long as I had the right ANC policy created, I could actually click on that ANC policy and say, hey, quarantine it, don't allow it, turn the port off, do whatever it is that we need to do to stop that activity of passing traffic over to the command and control channel. So I'm going to cancel out of this right here. And one other thing that I wanted to kind of show you was I talked about doing those policies automatically, not just enforcement manually. And I created a policy up here, but I want to walk you through it so that you understand what's going on. I called that my Cisco ISE enforcement policy. I would basically just turn it on by clicking the enable button. And everything that we do within Armis is a query through what we call the Armis query language. And it happens within this box. I can look for activities and alerts and applications, hosts. I can even look for specific users inside my environment. But in the case of of a policy, what I'm really looking for is a specific type of activity. And so what I've done is I've built this out. And that activity would look something like this. An activity on a device where a threat was detected, in this case it would have been a botnet, of the type security, and of that device, I want it to be in my corporate environment. I don't care about those devices that are in the guest network, but this is going to be on my corporate environment, and it's going to be an imaging device, in this case a CCTV camera, and then I want you to be able to take action on it. So this is what got built out. Can I take this information and copy it and paste it into the bar above and see what that's going to show me? Absolutely. But in this case, I'm just going to show you the policy. I can specifically choose a collector, an Armis collector that I want that to run on, or I can run them on all. The activity that I can look at is either all activities from those kind of devices, or they must be repeating activities. And then the policy-driven action, again, is an enforcement of a device, and I can select from my enforcement, in this case Cisco ISE, again, choosing the ANC policy that I want to use in order to either quarantine those devices or not quarantine those devices, maybe put them in a separate VLAN, throw them out to the guest VLAN, whatever that ANC policy is actually going to create. And then I can say, hey, I want this to happen all the time, or I can schedule that activity. And the last piece here is I can retroactively, once I create a policy, push it out to basically everything that I've seen as far as activities for the last, 7 to up to 90 days, and run that policy against that activity. So, really what that allows us to do is as I go back to my slide here, is give us that opportunity to really take the information that we've seen, first the discovery of the Armis devices, and take it farther than that. Just say, look, since we're seeing that traffic from all those devices that we've discovered, let's monitor the activity. If we see something anomalous, let's take action against that activity. But because we are completely passive, we take action through our integration partners such as Cisco ISE. So I know we've covered a lot of information in really a short amount of time, but our customers tell us that when they deploy Armis, sometimes they see 70 or 50 to 70 more devices sometimes than what they knew about, right? And in order to protect and secure your devices, you have to know about them. So, one of the things that we'd like to do is get into your environment, help you start to discover what you have in your environment. A lot of times we'll find active ransomware almost every week on some of our customers, and you don't want ransomware on your environment. You don't need to worry about critical alerts or threats inside your environment, or any kind of vulnerabilities that you might have on devices that you didn't know about. So let us help you. Let us have the opportunity to show you how we can work with Cisco ISE and our integration partners to provide you that level of discovery and really that level of risk assessment and that level of proactive, protection that you desire. So I think now we're ready to maybe answer some questions.
Sure, thanks, Terrence. We do have a few questions coming in. Let's see, let's start with, this might be a question for Brian, but either one of you. If you have Armis, do you need the Cisco ISE Plus module for device profiling?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So if you have ISE, so if you have Armis and you have ISE, as long as you're on the ISE Plus license subscription, the ISE Plus license subscription allows you or gives you the feature of PX Grid. So PX Grid is one of the many features that's part of the ISE Plus subscription. Basically, what happens is you can enable PX Grid, set up your PX Grid PSNs, and now you can configure your integration with Armis. So to answer the question, you do need to have an ISE Plus subscription.
But PX Grid is it a separate product from ISE?
No, so PX Grid is a feature of ICE. What happens is when you enable PX Grid, you set up a different persona on ICE. So as you know, ICE has different personas: the MNT node, the admin node, the PSN. So what happens is when you enable PX Grid, you now have a new PX Grid service node or a PSN, and you typically when you deploy it in a distributed environment. With the Armis integration, Armis has integrated using our newest version of PX Grid, so we can scale active-active. And what happens is all you do is enable that, and as long as you have the PX Grid subscription as part of your ICE Plus license, you're now good to go with using the integration.
Great. And
yeah, one other point I'd like to.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, one other point I'd like to make on that, and you're gaining advanced visibility into the endpoints as well that are authenticating against ICE when you have that Plus license with the profiler. So it's a really win-win.
And a question for Terrence: the 11 million device profiles. Can you explain what you mean by a device profile?
Yeah, sure. So 11 million device profiles and growing, right? So, yeah, what do we really mean? That's the types or the categories of types of devices, right? So when we talk about imaging, well, that's a category. And then types of imaging, that could be printers, that could be CCTV cameras, could be, you know, in display, you're talking about certain kinds of smart TVs, but you're also talking about displays that might be connected wirelessly to a computer, right? So the computer display. So that is really what makes up those 11 million types of or device types that you're asking about. To give you an example, we see people or have questions that people ask us all the time. Well, I've got a device that you've probably never seen before. It's homemade, or it's, you know, we were working with a coffee company and they had a coffee pot that they basically told us it's our own. You're not ever going to see or have seen this device before. And the reality is a coffee pot acts like a coffee pot when it's a coffee pot, right? So we didn't know exactly what kind of coffee pot it was, but it actually percolated and brewed coffee. So, you know, based on that, and trust me, I know it's kind of weird, but we hear about coffee pots that are connected all the time. This one, we figured it out. It acted like a coffee pot. So we knew it was, and then we worked with them to understand the make, model, and, you know, some of the variations of what that device became. So that device type is really those fingerprints, right? Those signatures that tell us it's a coffee pot or it's a CCTV camera. Hopefully that helps.
Cool. And we've got two of the same questions, so I'll lump them together. If you could tell us what version of PX Grid is supported by Armis.
Yeah, sure. So a PX Grid comes in two flavors. V1 was our older SDK method where our partners took in a thick client. And Armis has gone down the version 2 route. So basically, the integration is based on WebSockets and Restore Stomp, but it's still a clientless mechanism for Armis to integrate into PX Grid. You still get all the rich pub/sub functionality of context, adaptive network control, and that's what Armis has built the integration on. So you need ICE version 2.4 and above to run the integration with Armis.
Got it. And for Terrence, what kinds of events can I use when defining policies? Can you share a few examples?
Yeah, it's a great question. So basically, the way we create policies is based on activities. When we talk about activities on a computer, managed, unmanaged, whatever it happens to be, an activity would be something that happens within that playbook of information, right? I just came online. I'm a new device. You don't know anything about me. That's an activity in our world. I just changed my host name. And everything that we do is device centric. So you can have a device that changes an IP address, right? DHCP comes to mind. If I just changed my IP address, but I have the same MAC address, that is an activity in the world of Armis. So anything that is an activity, including, you know, some of the things that we talked about, I see a threat. or I connected to a bad reputation website, or I'm connecting to a known botnet command and control channel. Those are all activities that we see, for example, and those are the kind of things that I can create policies against to protect those devices. And again, in the case of Cisco ISE, be able to utilize them to, quarantine that device or put it in a separate VLAN, something like that.
Great. And a question about a step back to recover something that you already mentioned, the types of data that we share with ISE. Can you talk about the context that we share with ISE?
Yeah, so from an ISE standpoint, and I'm not as familiar with ISE as I should be, right? But some of the things that ISE looks at as far as what we're providing to them starts with the MAC address, right? We can give them the MAC address in Cisco ISE, and Cisco ISE can start looking at the same kind of information, or a lot of the same information that we look at, which is IP address. Some of the things additional that the ISE isn't looking at is information regarding where or when we last saw it, things like that. So all of that information that I showed you that we collect as far as OS make, model, things of that nature can be shared with Cisco ISE, again, starting with that MAC address, because in the Cisco ISE world, when you're talking about switch technology and layer 2 communication, it's all got to start with that MAC address. So based on that, and we're device centric, so we rely on that MAC address as well to help us understand that this device is the same device that's communicating across this IP address. So that's what counts in our world. So, and that's the kind of stuff that we can share with Cisco ISE.
And the question about visibility, do you have visibility into Bluetooth devices?
Yes, we do. Yeah. So again, that integration needs to happen with the wireless LAN controller. A wireless LAN controller actually is going to, I like to say, sniff the air, right? It's looking for clear frequencies so that it can broadcast its SSID. So one of the things that a wireless LAN controller will do is it will provide information regarding all of the other wireless communication protocols that are happening within its ability to see, right? So if there's Bluetooth devices that are connecting in the environment, like keyboards, like iWatches connecting to iPhones, those are the kinds of things that we're going to see. And we'll even take it a step farther. If we see an iWatch connecting to an iPhone that actually connected into your corporate SSID, that could be something that's bad, right? If that happens, we can create a policy against allowing Bluetooth connected devices to actually connect into the corporate SSID as well. So yes, we see Bluetooth, Blueborn, all kinds of stuff. Zigbee, you name it.
Oh.
Yep.
That's a good segue into the question I was just about to ask. If you could talk about native protocols we have visibility into.
Wow. Everything, right? So when you talk about medical devices, of course, there's some specific medical device protocols that we'll pull information from. I don't have the list in front of me. Pretty much everything. Modbus, when we talk about OT environments, I don't think we have seen a protocol yet that we haven't been able to provide ability to look into. So
great. And if anybody else has any more questions, we've got a few more minutes. Give everyone just a second.
You know what?
Oh.
I see a question coming in about a USB connected device. So here's the thing, right? We, again, are passive. We're only going to see information regarding specific applications or applications that are passing traffic through the environment, right? I like to tell people we'll look and provide you information on all of the applications that you're running on your laptop or computer, as long as that traffic is seen within the environment. Chrome, Firefox, all of that kind of stuff we're going to see. Notepad, Solitaire, we're not going to see it, right? Because it doesn't communicate on the network. So as far as a USB device, if that USB device actually is connecting to a computer and then passing traffic through that computer into the network, yes, we will be able to see that USB connected device. If that device is not communicating, we're not going to be able to see it.
You got it. I think that's all the questions that we had. Okay, that wraps up today's session. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today and to thank our speakers, Terrence and Brian. For more information about our integration with Cisco, you can visit armis.com. And if you'd like to schedule a live demo, you can also visit armis.com/demo and fill out a form there, and we'll have somebody get right back to you. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Everybody, have a great day and stay safe.